turn your Bibles, please, to 1 Corinthians, the 7th chapter. 1 Corinthians, the 7th chapter. It's good to see everyone here this evening. Thank you for coming to our services on Sunday evening. I want to look at this particular chapter because you may have questions about marriage. There may be issues that come up. What if I'm married to this person? Is this right with God? Or this other person, is that right with God? And you begin to ask yourself, if that's the, let me get this right. If that's the case, what it needs to be going. This chapter helps us in some ways because it deals with marital issues that were important to Paul, and especially important to the Corinthians. And sometimes we need to realize that in these teachings of the Bible that we need to understand how we ought to be looking at them. And I thought it'd be interesting to see, well, there's so many things he says about marriage, divorce, and that sort of thing in this particular chapter. But is there a theme that runs through it? And so I said, well, let's just see what issues are being addressed. And the reason I'm saying that as well, the very first verse says, these are not things that Paul thought up by inspiration. He wrote them by inspiration, but he wasn't thinking of something that he thought up as they need to teach. These were things that they wrote. Now, concerning the things whereof Paul wrote, no. The things that indeed they wrote. And we don't have that letter. All we have is how he addressed the issues, which I think becomes very instructive to us as we try to understand marriage, divorce, remarriage, and those types of issues. But one thing that we see is that should I get married in light of the present distress? Well, I don't read anything here in these first 12 verses about that. Nope, you don't. And yet, that's the indication, that's the question I'm thinking they asked. Notice after it says in verse 1, it's good for a woman not to touch a man. What? It's not good for man to be alone, so he created man to be a woman, don't you touch her. That wasn't happening. They brought them together, husband and wife, cleaved to one another. Marriage was instituted and was going to be that for generations because he said a man ought to leave his father and his mother. Adam didn't have a father and mother. Adam and Eve were joined together. That wasn't their issue. Leave father and mother, well, where are they? But that would be for future generations. And Paul will hit it in Ephesians, where he'll go back to the beginning. Jesus goes back to the beginning when studying about divorce and discussing that with the people. So when we talk about these issues that they're dealing with, it's not good to touch a woman. Maybe there is a context for that. Verse 6 through verse 9. I say by the way of concession, not of commandment. Because what he does, he tells them, a man not to touch a woman. But because of fornications, let each man have his own wife, woman have her own husband, render them the sexual due there. All that comes falling in there. But what was the issue? I'm saying because should I get married in this present distress? Paul says, I don't say this by way of concession, not of commandment. Yet I would that all men were even as myself, single. Howbeit each man hath his own gift from God, and one after this manner, and another after that. Some cannot live without that sexual relationship. Paul could. But I'm not giving a commandment. I'm giving concession. Well, what must be happening this time that it says it's not a commandment, but it's a concession? So you be married or not, we're kind of going that direction. Should I get married or not? Well, Paul has his reasoning, but it's because of his understanding, not what God has commanded. We drop down to verse 25, and we, for the first time, get to realize this is what's happening. Now, concerning virgins, see, they haven't been married yet. I have no commandment of the Lord, but I give my judgment, as one that hath obtained mercy of the Lord to be trustworthy. I think, therefore, this is good by reason of the distress that is upon us. Not that it's coming, the distress that is upon us. That's why I say the present distress. It's here. Should I get married? Should I stay single? Should I remain single? I think, therefore, this is good by reason of the distresses upon us, namely, that it's good for a man to be as he is, single. To be as he is. Verse 32, we're getting into the chapter, and he's still dealing with this as he writes to them. Verse 32 is, but I would have you free from cares. He that is unmarried is careful for the things of the Lord, how he may please the Lord. But he that is married is careful for the things of the world, how he may please his wife, and is divided. Present distress is there. If you're married, you're going to have other concerns other than just the Lord. It might be better to remain single, like Paul is suggesting. No commandment, but because of the distress, he's answering their question. And so the woman that is unmarried and the virgin is careful for the things of the Lord, that she may be holy, both in body and spirit, and he that she is married is careful for the things of the world, how she may please her husband. And this I say for your own profit. Not that I may cast a snare upon you, but for that which is seemly, and that you may attend unto the Lord without distraction. I don't have a wife. He's answering this, what I think is the issue throughout the chapter. Present distress, should I get married or not? But if any man thinketh that he behaveth himself unseemly toward his virgin daughter, is inserted there. I think the context is there. I'm not going to give her in marriage. But if he thinks he should, if she's past the flower of her age, and if need so requireth, let him do what he will. He sinneth not, let them marry. He hadn't sinned. We're not dealing with that kind of issue. But he that standeth steadfast in his heart, having no necessity, but hath power as touching his own will, and hath determined this in his own heart, to keep his own virgin daughter, shall do well. So then both he that giveth his own virgin daughter in marriage doeth well, and he that giveth her not in marriage shall do better. Now, good to touch a woman. Because of what? Present distress. He doesn't bring it up and just stop it here. He comes back at it from different directions. Not bringing forth a judgment of God. You'll sin if you get married, or you sin if you don't get married. If they burn in their passion, let them marry. Some people have that gift, some don't. But it's because of the present distress. And it takes us all through this particular chapter. But he deals with other specifics as well. What other issues are we talking about in this section? Should I remain married? Should I remain in a marriage? We come to verse 10 and 11. Notice he says in verse 8, to the unmarried. But if they have not continency, that they can't control that passion, let them marry. For it's better than marry than to burn in hell. No, burn in passion. They have no control over those feelings. Let them marry. But now he says, but unto the married. See, these are people already married. I give charge to you, not I, but the Lord, that the wife depart not from her husband, but should she depart, let her remain unmarried. So I'm not leaving because I'm going on a trip. I'm not leaving because I'm about to go preach the kingdom of God with Jesus. I left her. She's not divorced in that sense. But the idea of remain, I was married, now I'm going to be unmarried. That's divorce that's happened, not just going on a 6-month trip. Let her remain unmarried, or else be reconciled to her husband. She did the wrong. She's leaving. Reconciliation comes from that which is the guilty one to the innocent one. I've got to be reconciled back to him. No, he needs to be reconciled to me. He didn't do any wrong. You left him. And it wasn't the reason that God gave. And he said, the Lord deals with that. Here were people that were married. Here, Jesus is speaking to a Jewish people and his people, and bringing forth the law that would apply to the Gentiles as well. Mark is addressing in his gospel more to a Gentile world. That's why you see a woman could put away a man. Matthew, a woman's never going to put away a man. That wasn't lawful under their law. But the Greeks could, and he deals with that subject matter. I wonder if she starts putting away somebody. Same law, where Jesus says, from the beginning, God made them both male and female. What God has joined together, which is a marriage that is lawful. They have a right to one another, husband, wife, man, male, female. They shall become one flesh. And what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. Separate. Don't do that. Don't divorce. And that's clear. He said, Jesus says this to those who are married. So should I remain in a marriage? Yes. Till death do us part, we said in our vows. Some don't say that anymore, but I did. For better, for worse, sickness and health. When things are good, when I'm rich, we're poor. Submitting promises of oaths before God. Till death do us part. And Jesus would give one reason for putting away, and we know that from Matthew 19 and verse 9, but that was a reason. Whosoever put away the wife, except for fornication, married, now they're going to be committing adultery. That's an unlawful marriage. Marry another, unlawful marriage. The Bible does speak about that. It's almost like there's no unlawful marriages. John the Baptist says, here, Herodias, you married. They married one another. Herod did, married her. And his wife, and found out they were married. No, that was just incest. Well, it was unlawful marriage. It happens in the Bible. And here is Jesus giving this remark, this teaching from Matthew 19. He had addressed that, and therefore he's dealing with that. Now, so then who are the rest? Unto the married I give charge in verse 10. But verse 12, but to the rest say I, not the Lord. Well, I want to hear the Lord. I don't want to hear Paul. Jesus didn't deal with this particular situation. And Paul is having to, because I think they wrote about it. Should I remain in a marriage with an unbeliever? How could that happen? Probably what's happening, the gospel is being spread. Husband and wife are listening to the gospel. One obeys the gospel and the other one doesn't. We're individuals. We've got to go on our own faith and knowledge. And there'll be a man that's been married, but now he's become a Christian. God's holy. And here's an unbeliever, doesn't believe in God. To the married, I say, so they wouldn't, should I get married to one that's not a Christian? We could address that, but he did it to the rest. Here are the rest of the people. What has happened? The gospel's being spread, and now you find yourself that your mate's not a Christian yet. Peter will address that in 1 Peter, dealing with the marriage there in 1 Peter 3. That could happen to a wife. Her husband's not a Christian. He tells her how to act with that. But Paul is just addressing this issue. Is that should I get married? Should I remain married to one indeed of a like faith, or maybe they're both Jews and that sort of thing? But to the rest, there is a division. It's an unbeliever. So we pick up that strain of thought. But to the rest say, I, not the Lord, because he did not specifically deal with that, as he has done in Matthew 19. But Paul is addressing as an inspired apostle, laying down what is coming from the Lord now concerning this issue. If any brother hath an unbelieving wife, and she's content to dwell with him, let him not leave her. What's the law? Don't leave. You're married for life, till death do you part. Don't leave her. Don't depart from her. And the woman that hath an unbelieving husband, and he's content to dwell with her, let her not leave her husband. Why is that? Because she's become a Christian. he's become a Christian. If the unbeliever is content to dwell with her because they are a Christian, don't you leave them. Husband, don't leave your wife. But she's an unbeliever. I'm answering your question. Should I remain married to an unbeliever? No. And he gives some explanation. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified in the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified in the brother. He's a Christian. Else were your children unclean. That's unlawful before God. Your children would be unclean. But now are they holy. This is a holy relationship. Remain in it. And they're content to dwell with you. How is an unbeliever sanctified in the life of a believer? I thought the only thing could sanctify us was the blood of Christ. And they're not a Christian yet. How could anything set them apart in a way that they're sanctified? So as he's looking at that part which is good. You're in a relationship that is good, and all we have to do is look at 1 Peter 3. She's chaste. She's not to be wordy. She's not going to save them by her word, but the word. And she lives according to that word. And maybe it will win a soul. And Paul addresses, wonder if they don't. He addresses that here. But the possibility, your husband is sanctified. Look at the type of life they're going to be living. They're not going to be going on the weekends and having parties, getting drunk and all those things, marriage and all those things. She's chaste. She has a meek and quiet spirit. And I'm profited by her. She honors, I'm not even a believer, and she honors me as a husband. And that's what God would have us to do, and do that for the man and his wife as well. But yet if the unbelieving departeth, verse 15, let him go. Let him depart. The brother or the sister is not under bondage in such cases, but God hath called us in peace. Now read those things together. Because some say, well, 1 Corinthians 7, if the unbeliever depart, then you're not under bondage and you can get married again. Didn't say that. He used a word bondage that's different from being bound in marriage. For verse 39, a wife is bound as so long time as her husband liveth. If you're bound, be not loosed in verse 27. That's dealing with the marriage relationship, but bondage is slavery. And Paul uses the term in a sense that it's never been slavery. Marriage has never been slavery, and it's not now. Never has been, it's not now. That's the force of the Greek language. You're not under bondage. You say, well, that's present tense. No, it's not. It's imperfect. I mean, it never has been that in marriage, and it stands not that now. And if you go after that husband as he's an unbeliever because he cannot stand you being a Christian, you're now being in bondage. He did not call you to be in bondage. Let him go. Let her go. You're not in bondage in such cases. But he called us for peace. Don't have the controversy. Let him go. And what's he doing? He's making the believer's heart, you be centered on being a bondservant of Christ. And you are to be doing, not to be a bondservant of men. Verse 23, you were bought with a price, become not bondservants of men. There's his bondservant, slavery. And here's the thing, why would you stay with them? Because I love them and I love their soul. I think I can do this 1 Peter 3 thing. I think I can do that and I'll save them. They're leaving you. They're leaving for a reason that you're a Christian and you're not going to compromise that. I'm gone. Let them go. He called us in peace. And then he answers this dilemma. For how knowest thou, O wife, whether thou shalt save thy husband? Or knowest thou, O husband, whether thou shalt save thy wife? Only as the Lord had distributed to each man, as God hath called each, so let him walk. And so I ordain in all the churches. That's getting down to law. Jesus didn't address this. Well, the Holy Spirit has. Jesus was addressing people that indeed were married. They had the same faith. But now we got believers and unbelievers. That was an issue being addressed in the context of the present distress. What happens when they leave you? That may be leaving you because I don't want to be suffering the persecution that you as a Christian. They're going to be distracted because they see your faith is going to remain. And so in these verses, we begin to realize he answers that. Let them go. You don't know if you're going to save them or not. God has called you in peace. You're not to be a bondservant of men. You're a bondservant of God. And that's the context. It wasn't, is our marriage dissolved? I'm not under bondage. So if my husband deserts me, I'm free from the marriage bond. Didn't ever say that. Bound as long as they live. But being a bondage thing was what they were doing, unbeliever. But if they're content to dwell with you, it's holy. If it's holy to remain in it, it's okay to start it. But that doesn't mean that's good judgment. But it's not sinful. I've seen marriages start that way and they don't convert them. Yes, and they drive people away from the Lord into denominationalism. I've seen that happen. But I've seen people converted too. Because they indeed were involved about living with them, and they were sitting, but they never put that kind of demand. They were content to dwell with them. If it's wrong to form, it's wrong to stay in it. It was okay to stay in it. Don't let them go. But if they separated, you're not to be in bondage to them in such cases, but remain a bondservant of the Lord. So here are issues being addressed throughout this chapter. Should I get married because of this distress? That's the theme. Should I remain married? Yes, you should. Should I remain in a marriage with an unbeliever? From your point of view, yes. You're sanctifying them. You're giving them opportunity to obey the gospel. But what we see in these verses is can I remain in an unlawful marriage? Can I do that? And there's people say, yes, you can, in 1 Corinthians 7. So let's look at that for a moment. Brethren, let each man wherein he was called, therein abide with God. He says it twice when he speaks about abiding with God. Verse 24, brethren, let each man wherein he was called, therein abide. And that's supposed to be done. In verse 40, she's happier if she abide as she is. That means now she doesn't have a wife. So abiding in the calling wherewith you were called, that was to be something they were to follow. Beginning with verse 18, was any man called being circumcised? Let him not become uncircumcised. Let each man abide in the calling wherewith he was called, in verse 20, instead of 24. And then we see in 20, let each man wherein he was called, therein abide with God. So here I am. I'm married, and one of us has now obeyed the gospel, and I can now remain in the marriage with her because God wants peace. I'll read that here in this chapter. And he doesn't want us to have storms. So my marriage is okay. I can abide with God wherein I was. When I became a Christian, I'd already been married, and it was unlawful marriage. I was married to someone I had no right to. Whether it's guilty fornicator or one just put away for fornication or not. Wherever I was, I can abide with God in that marriage that you may think is unlawful. Is that what Paul's talking about? That's how it's used by a lot of people. I say no. Because between those two verses and in that context, we find some specifics. Was any man called and being circumcised? Let him not become uncircumcised. Hath any been called in uncircumcision? Let him not become circumcised. Abide wherein you were called. I know he's speaking about the Jews and the Gentiles, the circumcised and the uncircumcised. That's what he meant by let each man abide wherein he was called, therein abide with God. Because those were holy, it wasn't anything determined if you're saved or not, circumcision or uncircumcision. So he dealt with that. We'll notice that, we see that in verse 18. And then we see in verse 21, was any of you called being a bondservant? There's our slave. Care not for it, nay, even if thou canst become free, use it rather. For he that was called in the Lord, being a bondservant, is the Lord's freedman. But I'm a bondservant, but you're really free from sin. Likewise, he that was called being free is Christ's bondservant. I'm a freed man. I'm no slave. I'm a servant of Christ. That's what it means to be in Christ. That's the calling. That was the circumstance where you were in when indeed you were called. That's the context. And what we begin to realize is that that's what he had in mind, not an unlawful marriage. So I ask you, is homosexual marriage okay? That's the state we're in, and we're obeying the gospel. Do I have to leave that marriage and leave that? Or can I abide? I am to let each man where he's called abide with God. Is that what he's teaching here? And Jesus says in Matthew 19:4-5, when he speaks about who was involved in marriage from the very beginning, and we see that in Genesis, male and female, they were created. What did he say in verses 4 and 5 leading up? Do not put asunder what God has joined together, verse 6, and his point about divorce. Have you not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female? And said, for this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, shall cleave to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. There's the marriage relationship. That's what God joins together. What it is, male and female, not two males, not two females. But the law is that, we okay with same-sex marriage. Well, laws can be doing that. But is it all right if you want a relationship with Christ, is it all right to have that marriage, say, I'm going to abide in that marriage because that's wherein I was called and I can abide with God? Some teach that. From 1 Corinthians 7. They have Bible for that. But they pervert it. They ignore the context. They ignore the things that Jesus has said. That's who is married. That's why people say, you're crazy. He said, there's no such thing as homosexual marriage. We're having it all the time. No, marriage was always to be between a male and a female. That's what marriage was for. There wasn't any other type of marriage. Wasn't marriage with animals. Wasn't marriage with two men and two women. That's not marriage. Because God instituted it. And therefore, we're just following what has come from the beginning. Homosexual marriage is not an unlawful marriage that God is going to say it's okay because now you're a Christian. What a polygamous marriage. What's that like? Well, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7:20 in verse 2, because of fornication, people were to be married. But I said, well, let's just have 3 or 4 wives or that sort of thing. We can have a polygamous marriage. I'm in a polygamous marriage and I've come to the Lord. Can I abide in that? Yes, you can. Whatever you were when you were called by the gospel, you abide in that calling and you do so with God. Well, in this chapter, Paul is addressing those who indeed were not, if they're living polygamous marriage, they're going to come out of them. But because of fornication, let each man have his own wife, not wives, and let each woman have her own husbands, not husbands. But each one was for, that's stressed in the New Testament. Polygamous marriages were out there, but this doesn't say, well, polygamous marriage is okay. Because of 1 Corinthians, by there 2 times he says that. Yeah, but in that context, he tells you what the circumstances were, and you could be circumcised or not circumcised. You could be a slave or a freeman, and you're not sinning. Abide in it. Now we're going to take this route? No, we're not. What about married to a divorced person? He's divorced, but you don't care about looking into it too much. You've fallen in love with someone like that, and and you're thinking about being married to them, you can stay in that relationship that was unlawful. But I say unto you, everyone that putteth away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, maketh her an adulteress. Why? Because the next relationship she has, and she's not even guilty of fornication, but someone has put her away. It wasn't for the cause of fornication. You made her an adulteress, because she's in that position. Now, not that she's an adultery, and now just because she's put away. Whosoever shall marry her when she's put away committeth adultery. So here you married someone that was put away. They weren't even guilty of fornication, but you now are going to say, well, I can stay with her because she's just a put away person, but that's how we were called. We are Christians now. One of us is, and we want to please God. Well, you're committing adultery. And see, the blame there starts back, why did you divorce her? Whosoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a bill of divorcement. But I say unto you, everyone, they did that in Mosaical law. Jesus says, I say unto you, everyone that putteth away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, maketh her an adulteress. Notice who made whom an adulteress. She has another sexual relationship, marriage or not, be adulteress. She's going to have to answer for her own lack of control. You put her there. You made her one. You put her in that position, and you hold responsibility. What's it all about? Don't you do that. Marriages are to remain solvent. And here you put one there because you just didn't like her, and you put her away. What if you're then married to one who has divorced for reasons other than fornication? Jesus addresses that in Matthew the 19th chapter and in verse 9. When the question had been in this context, can one put away for any cause? So he's driving it home. Takes them from the beginning. And the answer is this way. They say, why then did Moses command a bill of divorcement and to put her away? They ask a question. He said to them, Moses, for your hardness of heart suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning, it hath not been so. Where has Jesus taken the Jewish people in this case? He took them to the beginning. That's never been from the beginning that you dissolved that relationship. Why was that happening? He says it because of their hardness of heart. And when you go back and read Deuteronomy, where that law was given, it was a law given, it went in effect. If you've done something, what's going to be the consequences of that? And women were not protected, so a lot of times they were divorced and they had no one to protect them. They had no governmental assistance, and made it very difficult. And he says, because your heart's hard. So what did that legislation do? It said, hey, you're putting her away because she's not pleasing to you. And you give her a bill of divorcement so she can be another man's wife. But make sure you're doing that because you can never have her back again. But she wants to be reconciled. You can never have her back again. That's why when we see here in passages dealing with divorce or remarriage, that we're under not the Mosaical law, we're under the New Testament law because you can be reconciled to your mate. We see that here in this chapter. You can be reconciled. That's not going to happen. You can't ever have her back. Why? To slow you down in that time frame, for people to come around with Jesus and that teaching will come back to the beginning. But it's to slow down this flippant divorce. You burnt the toast. I'm tired of it. You can never have her back when she makes good stew. Oh, you remember that one, don't you? You won't have her back again. Slow it down until the Lord comes and takes us back to the beginning. And so here's a person divorced. Be for fornication? Or is divorced and it's not for fornication? Those people, the next relationship they have will be adulterous. If their mate still living, and death is indeed do us part. But that's what we see here. And I'm asking, is that going to be okay? Just got divorced and now we become a Christian? Those who are divorced that would come back to God. In a book Brother Haley wrote, showing compassion for lost souls, in his title. And he would say, but that's going to have to be, God's going to have to allow that to happen. No, he doesn't allow unlawful marriages. And here's the right person, male, female, they have a right to one another, never been married before, or one who's put away for fornication, he can marry again. All those things are there. And we're looking at here in the end, well, are these marriages okay? That's the state we're in. He said, no, that's not what he wasn't saying stay in sin. Abide in sin, he wasn't doing that. You could abide in being circumcised or not. You could abide being a servant or being a slave. That's the text that we're looking at. And when the chapter ends, he speaks about relationship. What happens when your husband, wife, but in this case the husband dies, and now you're a widow? What does God say? What has He said about this? And the chapter closes. A wife is bound for a long time her husband liveth. But if the husband be dead, she's free to be married to whom she will, only in connection with the Lord's teachings on the subject of marriage. Not that she's a Christian or not, or he's a Christian or not, but only in connection with the Lord. What does the Lord say? Do you have a right to her, to them, or not? But he says, she's happier if she abide as she is after my judgment. And I think also have the Spirit of God. Revelation that Christ gave wasn't dealing with that particular subject, so Paul addresses that because that's what they wrote about. And it deals with the thing. Here is, why would you say it would be better? Because of the present distress. You're going to be divided. What if they're going to capture you and going to put to death your kids and your wife? You got to denounce the Lord. What if you put that kind of pressure? If you weren't married, you wouldn't have that. But now you're divided. And it's not sinful that you care about the husband or wife. It can lead to sin, but not necessarily on this occasion. I don't want you to have that conflict. It's better to remain unmarried in these situations. And that's what 1 Corinthians 7 is indeed talking about. It's not abiding in sin. It's abiding in whether I came from the Jew or Greek background, whether I was a slave or a freedman, which was very much so and play it with the Roman world. And that's what he was dealing with. You don't have to change that, but we have to change sin. And what we're seeing so many times is how the Bible, when Paul wrote to Timothy, they don't allow marriages. That's a doctrine of demons. They don't allow unlawful marriages. The problem was they weren't allowing marriages at all. And we see these particular passages used where you're not under bondage if they desert you. You can get married again. It's okay with the Lord. We need to realize they have a context. And it wasn't the idea of breaking the bond where you're bound till they die, Romans 7. All those things harmonize, but the context was, and it's so clear, why would I stay with them? I want to save them. That's good. You don't know if you're going to or not. But you're going to compromise with the Lord? Not for a moment. I'll be a bondservant of the Lord, whether I'm a slave or a freedman. We're all bondservants of the Lord. Put Him first. And that's what these passages are doing. Not allowing for unlawful divorces when they become called by the gospel and they can stay in the relationship they're in. You may have to leave it in order to please God. This evening, if you're not a Christian, I want to encourage you to become one. And Paul in Romans 7 speaks about, especially to the Jewish mind, that indeed they knew that they were to be involved with the law, but what if the law was put away by the death of Jesus Christ? What if death occurred? He makes the imagery that you could be released from the law, be joined to Christ, and bring forth fruit unto God. Wouldn't you like to live a life that's bringing forth fruit unto God, like with a marriage, a relationship, bringing forth children, bringing forth fruit unto God? You could be fruitful in your life as a Christian. He needed you dead to the law, you be alive unto Christ. And we need to be alive unto Christ, dead to sin, put away the sinful life and start living the life of a Christian. You'll never regret that. You'll be a good influence to save your souls and those that do hear thee. And make sure that your relationship, your marriage is right, and that you fulfill your responsibilities and make that a glorious relationship. Help one another get to heaven. This evening we offer the invitation gospel. It's there for you. Come and obey it as we stand and as we sing.